All right, here we go. Part 3 of the critique. There'll be at least one more after this, maybe 2, but most likely 1. And that should cover it for this assignment. So let's get underway. Let's start here. Ah, what a pretty little flower. Nice exposure. Just a little bit under. Let's take a look at the histogram to see what we really have. So we'll do adjustments, levels. As you can see, there's quite a bit of space over here. So let's bring this over. That should brighten us a little bit. Now, our shadows are going off the edge, but I think we can still live with that a little bit. Let's see what we can do with the curves. We'll do image, adjustment, curves. Now we're going to do a standard type of film curve, except very subtle. We'll bring these highlights up a little. We'll bring the shadows down a little. We'll bring these midtones up just a touch. If we click the preview on and off, you can see that we've brightened it a little bit. Okay, now we've got a basic exposure set for this. Let's see what we can do. Where is the point of focus, the focal point of this image? Well, obviously, it's the one thing that stands out, this yellow flower in this sea of green. So this really is the thing that the main shot is all about. But it's dead centered. Remember, there is a basic rule of composition that says normally you do not put things in the dead center like a bullseye because it tends to make them static. Well, in a shot like this, that might be okay. It is a quiet, calm shot. But you have so much of this competing green around it that it starts to take away from this central flower. Once we've established that it's in this field of green, then we don't need to show all of it. So once again, let's see if we can find a somewhat better crop for it, a somewhat better composition. Now, if we try to go with most of the shot on this side, here's our thirds breakdown. We start to realize something. This flower is aimed in this direction. And that really establishes the leading direction for our shot. So let's move this off center a little bit. Now we're still roughly centered, but you can see it's starting to feel a little less static than it did before. Okay, so let's take that. Interesting little kitchen tableau. This is right out of a documentary on something, American Houses, whatever. I'm not sure there's anything really that I would do to it except try to figure out what is this ghost figure. It almost looks like there are bones, like a skeleton hand in here. Is this the ghost of the kitchen? We might be able to bring out this stuff, the leashes and things for the animals. Since we've got the food bowls sitting here in the middle, this might be another connection to them. So I think the only thing I would do here, take that out, make this a screen. Oh yeah, there's lots of detail in there. We'll hold down the Alt key, make this a reversed mask. I have the white brush left over from the last one. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Oh, I can bring that out a little. Maybe I can bring out some of this as well. If I'm going to document the kitchen, I might as well make it a good documentary. And that's really about all I would do to this. The exposure is fine. If you wished, what might have been nice, this chair is kind of a distraction, but there's no way really to remove it at this point because we don't have the data to rebuild this wall behind it. So the solution would have been to have moved it when you shot it. But it's an interesting comment. There are a lot of folks that are into this. Back in the 60s, 70s, there were a number of really famous photographers who did monographs or collections of photography turned into books that were documenting the American way of life. And they would do it by showing the environment, showing the kitchens, the garages, the living rooms, and letting you decide what does the environment in here and the stuff in the environment say about the people. And there were really some fascinating images that came out of that. So I don't think I would do much to this. Oh, here we have a very nice shot. When I first saw this, until I read the comment, I had no idea that what she was holding was a surfboard. And she could be under a rock overhang for all that this tells us. If you're going to make it clear that somebody's holding a surfboard, especially to those of us who may not know that just naturally, then you have to make it really clear what this is. Maybe show a fin, have her hold it so that you can see enough of it to really identify it. Failing that, then since this no longer has any major impact on the shot for me, what is the shot? It's her face, this smiling, laughing, happy face. So let's bring that face out a little. She has a strongly developed line because she's looking in this direction, so we need to leave that a little bit, give her room to look. And now the shot has become about her, not about this thing that could be a 40-ton boulder about to crush her unawares in the shot. But this part's really nice. You made a nice catch. What I would be interested in knowing is, could I bring out a little more detail in her hair? Let's see. We'll do a screen layer. Oh yeah, there's lots of detail there. Look at that. So, again, we'll do an inverted mask. Hold down the Alt key. Use the white brush. This group of pictures seems to be really based around that white brush. I'm going to need a little more opacity than that. And maybe to really concentrate you on her face, because there's enough shadow in here, is let's flatten this and then do a vignette. Now I need a black brush, a big one. We'll set the opacity down to about 50% just so we don't get overblown with this. The cool thing about this, unlike trying to dodge this area or burn it, is I can never make it lighter than the original was. So I can't go too far with this. I can make this whole 100% transparent, but I can't make it 120%, so I can't get brighter than the original was. And that lets me concentrate on her a little more. Cool. Nice shot. Oh, nice air-conditioned home. Somewhere out there. Wouldn't have to worry about spending much money to get some nice cross breezes in the house. It appears that we've really got too much dynamic range. So let's pull this in and take a look at the levels. Oh yeah. See what's happening is the shadows are going off the edge and the highlights are going off the edge. If this was happening, this is a good time when you've got this much dynamic range to check the histogram in your camera before you shoot. We can frequently bring some shadow detail back, but if highlights are gone, there's not much we can do. We have this little spike that's running off of the end. That's probably this highlight right in here, cloud or whatever. So there's not too much we can do for the overall range of this. The only thing we could do potentially is bring some of this detail back in the, whatever this is burned out Hulk in here. So I'll just let this one go by. We could do this yet another way. I've been doing all of these using layer styles, but let's make another layer. And now we're going to do it kind of an old-fashioned way. We're going to work on this background. So we'll come into Image, Adjustments, Curves. Let's pull this up out of the way. And now let's pull these shadow tones up. The only thing I care about is what's happening here. It's still so dark. This is lost in shadows. I can't bring that back. But I can bring out some detail. And what is this? An old bookshelf or shelving unit of some kind? I can bring up a little bit of the tone in this shadow. I can help it a little bit, but the exposure has me absolutely stuck with this. So I'm going to say okay. Go back up to my top layer. Do a layer mask. And now with my black brush on this, I'm going to see if I can bring a little of this back. I'll bring this shadow back here. The only danger in doing things this way is if you recall the original material that I gave you on sequencing, dealing with tonalities in this traditional way can sometimes, in fact often, will affect the color. So normally we do tonalities first and then work with color, because if we did the color first and then go into the tonalities, we may end up messing up the color that we set in the first place. One of the reasons to use the layers and layer styles is that unless we're using a style that is designed to change the color, using it to change the tones, like with the multiply layer and the screen layer, tends not to screw around with the color. So it can be an easier way to do things. So with this, now we have the shadows a little more in hand. Now if we wanted to make this area all even, so we didn't have this blown out white in the background, there's an incredibly simple way to do this. I'm going to take the eyedropper and pick up this sky color. put it in the brush. And now I'm going to tell this brush to darken. Set my opacity down. With the brush set to darken, remember what has happened. We've talked about this before. It will only paint on tones that are its same tone or lighter. It will not paint on darker things. So our color is this light blue. I can come over here and click. I'm clicking now. Nothing is happening because all of this is darker than the tone we want. But I can come and fill in that blue because it's already, that white area is lighter than the surrounding areas, and the surrounding area is darker than the blue. So I can pick that up and put that blue in there. Now, if I wished to darken any of this blue or any of the sky so that the wall stood out, then all I have to do is go to my luminosity layer, do an image adjustments, black and white, and now take those light blues and cyans, blues and cyans, and darken them. Since the only place I want it is in the sky, but it's also darkening this, now I have to make a layer mask. It's white. I've got a black brush. I can go in and erase through to that part that didn't change. And I can add a little dynamic tonality to this. Okay, let's grab our last one here. Makes me hungry. Typically speaking, when you're shooting food seriously and it's being lit by a professional food shooter, it's almost always backlit or sidelit. And the reason for that is that when you're seated at the table looking at a plate of food, you are blocking the light coming straight on it from the front. And so most of the light is coming from the back. And it has the happy byproduct of rim lighting things so that these bits of pasta would have a lighter area on top, shadow coming forward. You would see this texture a whole lot better. It would show up some of this because the light's coming, it looks like pretty much straight down on it. You are seeing the texture in the meat, but this has become pretty flat. The plate has become pretty flat. And ultimately, that kind of flat look makes the food look more stale. You want it to be a pretty dramatic lit shot. Unfortunately, as much as we can do in Photoshop, we cannot change the spotlight. We can force a light streak as if there were a light back here, but it doesn't know enough to look at this and know what the real depth is. So it wouldn't know that this piece of meat is sticking out a little, and it should therefore light the top and darken the meat behind it. It just doesn't know that. So the solution here is in the shot. But this certainly would make me want to chow into these pieces of steak. So it's a good start. So that does it for part 3. And in a minute, we'll go on to part 4.